And then each of these clusters have a particular economic drive. Yeah? As an example, Senai Skudai flagship zone E is the logistics and R&D cluster. And because this is where the Senai airport is, it also the logistics part is actually more of an airport hub kind of thing. So planning against around the logistics. Yeah? C and D are where the ports are. C is where Port of Tanjung Pelepas, and those of you who actually want to look into a career of logistics, do go and visit PTP. If nothing else, it's one of the newer ports we have, so it's got the latest technologies. It's also got the best planning of all the ports we have in Malaysia, and I include the ports in Port Klang and Westport, etc. in this comparison. Yeah? But it's a good plan. It allows for very well organized, efficient movement of cargo, etc., etc. But I won't bother with details. But if you're so inclined, I do encourage you to go visit and or at least go through their websites to understand how the operations of the port works. So C is a clean port, the container port, which is Port of Tanjung Pelepas, and D is what I call the dirty port, where all the heavy industries are. We put all the oleochemicals, stuff that you want to throw into the ground and hope nobody notices. You do it there on this side. I don't really mean it one before. Okay, and then you have A, which is essentially Johor Bahru City Centre. And why it's A in the plan, it is, despite it being fairly well developed, is the future plans for redevelopment. So whilst you say, okay, I want to do all these wonderful new things in greenfield sites, you do have to look at your heart of where you are today and see how we can improve. So going back to my earlier point about how you got something already, how can you improve it, make it better? And you must remember, we're now moving into 21st century and all that kind of stuff. So technology is now available to do things that were possibly not so easy in the past. Yeah? So must have allowed that mindset. And then I left B to the last because that's basically where most of the Iskandar Investment projects are, and that's the greenfield site of Nusajaya. And many things are going on there, which I'll talk about in a minute. But that's economic cluster, but going into services sector, tourism, medical, education, financial services for those who want to become investment bankers. So things like that, which are moving forward to what we think is going to be the key base of Iskandar in the future. And so here are some numbers, and yeah, go converted to ringgit. Okay, so where we are today in terms of GDP and what we want to do in projections, and you can just see these are just huge multiples of each number, and I won't bore you with details, it's all there, and I think we're leaving copies of you for those of you who are so inclined. But the planning, so this describes in one paper, a piece of paper, what the plan of Iskandar Malaysia is. Okay. Oh, I have to read it. Oh, is that our plan? Oh, okay. Okay, but what's important is, and again, those of you who want to be consultants and work with the McKinseys and the Boston Consultancy Group of the world, you have a house. Okay, you have a base of the well-established sectors which are manufacturing based in Johor right now to be reinforced by giving emphasis on services-based sector. Yeah? So that's where the bottom of the house is. And then moving forward in all this wonderful stuff about foundations and support systems, really about the economic drivers of Iskandar today and what we have to have in the future. And the main pillars are those clusters. The five main pillars that are to be reinforced. This is where areas where Johor in the south of Malaysia has been traditionally strong: electronics, petrochemicals, oleochemicals, food, agro-processing, logistics, and tourism. We want to reinforce with 4 new service-based pillars, which are the services of creative, financial services, education, and health. Now, some of this, this is verbiage, but basically what it means is you put all of this in place. You grow the economy, you grow the GDP, you grow into more of a knowledge economy rather than manufacturing economy. And what does knowledge economy bring? Higher income, higher GDP, higher gross national income. I've been told now that must use GDP, thought GNI. What's GNI? Gross national income. Oh, like that. Okay. This just came from India, by the way. I just got out of a Pemandu session. I don't know why I get stuck in this thing, but sometimes you national survey lah. Okay? So, you got to come. Yeah, got to come. Do what? Just listen. Okay, can. No problem. Anyway, so now we're talking about moving from the middle income track into a higher income track. What are the requirements? And this, in a sense, for us, was sort of the template, I think, where some of the national policies that's being set up are. This is what's required. This is the plan. Okay. Anyway, don't memorize it. I don't. So, but what does this convert to? At the end of the day, you're going to have, we are, for some of you who may remember this, in the middle 70s or late 70s, the then Prime Minister, it was in the 80s. The then Prime Minister, Dr. Mahathir, said that, okay, the only way this country can survive is if we grow our population to 70 million people. You know, I mean, I was just about to get married then, and I was like, bloody hell. I mean, so one of the first arguments my husband and I had was, how many kids should we have? So my husband was like, kita kena sambut seruan Datuk M, Dr. M. So, we should have 6 kids. And I was like, no way! But you get pregnant, you have the 6 kids. Anyway, so we ended up with 4. I shot a takut lah. But it was about, but he actually, you know, I mean, at that point in time we were all horrified. But you know, we were only about 20 million people then. But that's, and again, those of you who have economics background, if you look at what happened in India, China, and Indonesia in this last world financial crisis, it's hardly a blip. Now, why? Because the domestic market was strong enough to sustain the demand or whatever the economy was growing at. So there was still natural growth just from domestic consumption. And why? Got billions of people. Okay? So I mean, you know, both India and China have upwards of 1 billion people, and our neighbor, very close, Indonesia, has over 250 million people. So if you cannot sell overseas and your products can be used locally, especially if your population is moving from low income to middle income, so you're creating your own demand. So I mean, so by the way, those of you who haven't learned Mandarin, go learn. You know, I'm too old now to learn, so I'm telling you, go learn it. And I know, don't worry about India, they all speak English anyway, so no problem. Indonesia can speak bahasa, okay lah. But you know, I mean, seriously, in the future, and why this globalized approach is important. And whilst I made that point, but you know, having said that, this is emerging economies, yeah. I also listened to one doubtsayer, and this is a British economist based in Singapore that said, but still remember, whilst we focus on what's happening with the growing emerging markets of China, India, and of course when they say BRIC, they include Russia and Brazil. Of course now it's BRIIC, so it's Brazil, Russia, India, Indonesia, and China. That's me adding, by the way, it's not the economies of the world. Only because Indonesia is so close, must forget. Is that the fact that one American consumes that of 25 Chinese. Okay, so to equate the economies, it's not just on the population, it's about the total economies of the world. So regardless of what we say, it's still America sneezes, the rest of the world gets a cold. It's still quite true, but you know, I mean, the relevance of that is reducing as we go along and Asia grows, but still not something to scoff at. But anyway, I mean, just in context. But going back to this, and why I mentioned that is, in Iskandar, like the rest of Malaysia, we cannot depend purely on domestic because we don't have the population base. And even with growing the population from 1.6 million to 3 million, we still would not be able to achieve the intentions and the desired objectives. So we do have to look at international foreign investments as well. So primarily from efforts, not just ourselves, not just the proponents of Iskandar, i.e. IRDA and IIB, but many other players within the region. Very pleased to announce latest figure. Okay, this one increased already. Yeah. I was misquoted by those of you who read Business Times today. I was misquoted. I didn't say 70 million. I said 60 million, but somehow the reporter added 10 more billion. What? So the lesson of the day was, don't say anything to reporters. Just nod and smile. Okay, go and answer. Anyway, so 60 billion that's already been achieved in terms of commitments, and you know, so there are many players there. But these are probably the primary developers of Iskandar. Of course, IRDA is the Regional Development Authority. And here is another change. When we say regulator and one-stop agency, it doesn't mean, you know, I mean, this is the first CEO of IRDA used to say, don't call it one-stop center. Because when you say one-stop center, you come in, you stop, don't do anything. So it's now called Iskandar Services Center, right? So it's essentially to facilitate you as an investor coming in. By the way, and those of you who want to go into hotel business, do you know that to open a hotel in this country, especially if you're building a new hotel, you will have to have, drum roll, a minimum of 12 approvals. Okay? Oh. Right. So first you have to get all the building approvals, you know, go to BKL, get the development approval, and that stuff. So once completed, you've got to get your certificate of fitness. Now the authorities don't issue certificate of fitness. It's issued by a professional consultant, so which makes life slightly easier.